We're going to do 3 questions, about 10 minutes apiece, as a kind of warm-up for the larger discussion we're going to have with everybody. And the first of those questions is, what are the major achievements of the recovery advocates and support movement to date? Phil?
Do I have to say anything besides ditto what he said?
Well, when I was asked these questions ahead of time, there was really 3 simple bullets to me that when we started in 98, we were just setting out to see if the recovery community could be organized. And I think that we have proven that it has, and it can be and be very effective. That the motivating force, the slogan behind everything we did early on was putting a face on recovery. And I think at least in Connecticut, and I don't know about your neck of the woods, but there's more people being vocal about recovery, and it's been put on the map. And the last thing is that one of those early things that we advocated for were recovery support services. And just really a few short years later, look at the amount of services that are being provided by and for people in recovery. So those would be the 3 bullets I have.
I think certainly I would ditto everything that Bill and Phil have said, but some of the things that I think are really important for me is a broader understanding around the many pathways to recovery and validating that and discrediting some of the recovery police we've had out there. Recovery police that, you know, have thought one method or one pathway was higher in value than others, and I think that we've done some work in really reducing that. I think that elevating the idea of recovery values and having people...
Well, the speaker is...
Can't go any harder than behind us.
Understanding recovery values. I think also having recovery principles that you can continually fall back on, and going through all the work of developing all of those and working on that and seeing them actually operationalized is really important. I think really having people begin to look at this disease through a recovery eye and through a recovery lens as opposed to through the lens of addiction only is huge. And I think that it really changes attitudes and helps us to normalize this illness.
Thank you, Bev. Wow, this is huge right here. I think that for me and for APAA since 1998, the biggest was the relationship building that we've done. And this right here, I mean, I remember starting as an advocacy organization, and us 3 remember that those first 3 years was all about advocacy, but I remember the mapping of the community and to map the community to see who else in this community provides recovery, is doing recovery, you know, and it was nobody. I mean, we had lists on and on. Let's get in touch with the police, the treatment centers, etc., and nobody was actually doing recovery. So to see what we've come to today, and you haven't seen nothing yet. Right, that's right. Bill just gave it to us. And so I think we've come a long way, but the relationship building and the work that we've done, and you see it right around us. This is where we are. I'm excited about it.
I'm wondering, as part of that, how much changes you've seen in your own community around perception of recovery at the community level.
Having just come off the Philadelphia Walk with 20,000 people marching in the streets, I always give that as an example of the change that has occurred over these 15 years. I mean, I could never in my wildest dreams imagine that we would have individuals and families marching in the streets of Philadelphia with dignity and pride around their recovery. And so for me, the fact that the City Council has asked us to expand our walk route when they always tried to contain our walk route. You know, and finally have said, you've got too many people, we'd like to have you extend the walk a little bit more, was for us a huge, we're making a difference. And I think for individuals, seeing the pride in their faces where they only showed shame before is huge, is absolutely huge.
I think for us is this Recovery Community Center right here. This was the history that we've had people to walk in here and say, wow, this is, you guys have made history. You put a recovery center right in the heart of the African American community here that is devastated. You talked about that earlier, Bill, as far as the devastation of a community of addiction. And a guy like me coming out of Harlem, New York, you know, this is like putting the center right there in Harlem on 125th Street. And, Malcolm X or Martin Luther King, which we are on. So this is at a community level when you say, and really, like I said, you haven't seen none yet. We just got over here on January 1st on this side of town. So the resources too in the community that we're getting ready to really expand and bring recovery, that's going to be great.
We always want to see that recovery is understood and thoroughly embraced by the community. And now, I mean, I guess someone's talking about California, that it's cool to be in recovery in California. I don't know if that's true or not, but I would love to see that we're starting to understand that people in recovery are somewhat heroic. They're heroes. Someone that honestly embraces a recovery opportunity. And if you start to promote recovery, carry recovery like Bill was talking about, I've had that privilege of being a recovery carrier, and I've never run into resistance to my face. And I don't know what that's about, because to me, recovery is a simple sell, if you will. How do you argue against somebody getting well and into recovery? They might do it behind your back, but not to your face. And now that we've become more open about it, it's remarkable. So recently we had a well-known news anchor in Connecticut. She's was on air for many years, and now she recently got in recovery 2 or 3 years ago. And when she first got in recovery, she said, I want to tell everybody. And I said, whoa, 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 wait. And she really thought about it for a year, 2 years, and now we do a Voices of Recovery radio show that we just started to put together in this little studio. The top radio station in Connecticut airs it on 5:30 on Sunday mornings. Well, you can go with that, whatever you will. But the idea we're talking about is now they want to take that and put it in more prime time as we're starting to get tremendous feedback. So this acceptance of recovery is starting to be understood and embraced. We got a ways to go, but I'm really encouraged.
Bev, when you mentioned 20,000, I had to think, what does a politician do when they look out and see 20,000 people in recovery marching in the streets of their city? I talk about a wake-up call. What do you think are, from the three of you, what are some of the major threats that you see that we're facing as we move forward in this movement?
I think giving up our values and principles in order to get funding. I think it is very difficult, and it's sort of insidious, and it happens slowly. And if you give in to one thing, then there's another thing, and another thing, and another thing, and all of a sudden you don't know who you are anymore. And I think it is, you know, certainly something that is very real and very possible to occur for us.
I think professionalism too can be a problem and issue as far as peers and recovery supervision around who's going to supervise us, and of course master's degrees and bachelor's degrees, etc. And we don't want to put any kind of barrier to recovery. But I think that's one of the things we have to watch out for. The cool thing was that I remember Wilma Townsend and Samsa pulling us together on both sides and saying, you know, when there needs to be some national standards in place, right? And the standards will help us in the workforce and how do we, again, so taking it to the workforce, again, I think that we don't want any barrier, but for us to make the money that is, and for qualified peer recovery coaches to make, and for us in the community is huge.
Nothing, I don't have anything that you didn't already highlight, but what I was always thinking about is the primacy of individual recovery and how it applies to recovery community organizations and the movement as well. And I think that for me, you know, that, and for CCAR, that if we believe that if we conduct ourselves with honesty, integrity, and transparency, the funding will follow. And, you know, that's not really the classic sustainability plan. There's a strong spiritual component to that. But so far it's worked for us. And I think that for me, if my own personal honesty starts to waver, or my integrity, or I'm not transparent with others, my own recovery is in jeopardy. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked or worked with people in recovery whose personal recovery has eroded, and they're lying and they're not telling the truth, and usually disaster happens. And so how do we make that like core components of what we do so that people can see that? You know, we don't have anything to hide. Like Bill said, we're not cooking the books. Our finances are impeccable. And the other thing that I encourage is that we have so many forces that are looking to see us fail for whatever reasons that Bill also described, is that we circle our wagons and fire outwards, as opposed to the other thing where we circle our wagons and fire inwards. And a lot of times, you know, that's how we could implode, is we have to love and support one another. We're all on the same team.
You know, the three of you are among the longest tenured RCO leaders we have in the country, and I'm wondering, and they haven't rehearsed this, by the way, they didn't know this was coming, but I'm really curious about your reflections around personal vulnerability of leaders, of virtually everyone we have in this room, and sort of managing that vulnerability over time.
I was going to comment more on what Joe said about professionalism, and I think that we do a disservice to people when we don't teach professionalism. I think that there are a lot of people who really don't know how to work in the workplace. And I think that we set ourselves up for failures without really developing as organizations sort of what professionalism is. But I also think that creating a culture within an organization to support each other is really, really important. And you know, I've always believed in servant leadership, but I think servant leadership can at times get you into real trouble, because I think that it really maybe should be service leadership. And by service leadership, what I mean is that we provide service to others, but we are not the servant, in that we need to keep a piece of ourselves always in either who we are or what we do to keep us. I think that what do we do for fun is a question I always ask. And you know, when I have to stretch, what am I doing for fun? I know that I'm in trouble if I can't really put that on there. So I think we have to create cultures within our organizations of both teaching what professionalism is, but also teaching how to care and nurture for each other.
That's great. Thanks, man. I think for me, it's more about boundary issues too, and being an example of recovery. And can I be that true example the best I can? And that, you know, people know that you know, I've been a vegetarian for 25 years too, and so at 62 years old, right, I think that I'm one of those long-toothed ones you talked about earlier. That it's time for me to really be more of that person, that model that I can pass it on to. Who am I passing this on to? And I think we all need to look at that when we look at the recovery community. And then, you know, the great thing about the state of Texas is that we move forward and we've got some new servants, and we've got some new leaders, and we've got some new service leaders that are here that we can pass it on to. But as long as I can take care of myself and also be an example and be supportive to a lot of my friends in recovery, other leaders in recovery, other recovery communities, I think that's big for me. People look at me for that, I believe too, but I have to take care of myself first and practice my own principles of recovery. And that's why I'm so honored that you guys are here, that everybody's here today, because it also gives me some new friends to also have support from and get support and give support to.
So the question is around vulnerability as a leader. I discovered early in my program of recovery that what I really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And I also learned in my recovery what my purpose in life is, using Rick Warren's purpose-driven life, all of that. And my purpose in life is, and maybe similar to many of you, is to carry the message of recovery. So this all ties into vulnerability. You know, for me, if my God is for me, who can be against me? And wow, that this movement is spirit-led as far as I believe, and that, hey, I'm just honored and blessed to be on the side of the one who created me and the side of the one who saved me. So I just choose what I can do each day is the next right thing. And sometimes that has really tested me. You know, when you have to make really difficult decisions and you end up in court on you know, getting grilled by an attorney who's really ultra aggressive on something you did for the benefit of the organization and for the movement. So we all take our shots, but we all have support. And for me, I have a God that loves me and cares for me, and that's what will get me through.
Thanks, Phil. Could each of you talk a little bit about your thoughts about, if you look at the movement as a whole, what do you see as the next stages, next most important ideas, next most important strategies?
Once again, ditto. You know, we had very much organizationally looked at the role of families and what can we better do to look at the role of families, and also the whole issue of how do we break the intergenerational legacy of this disease. And when I look at how do we teach families to teach each other to stay well, I think it's one of the things that we probably haven't focused on, and I think we really need to. You know, when I see families walking together at the walk with little tiny kids, and sometimes even their dog, I think this is how it should be. And, you know, we shouldn't be all walking alone. You know, our families all should be there, just like other diseases, you know, when we rally the crowds. And I think that, you know, looking at how we can look at both young people and their families, but also the families of those of us who are older and our grandchildren, we really need to look at how do we help them remain families in recovery.
You know, one of the things we did here at APAA, and everybody see that big picture that we have on the wall, and that was done last week. And tonight, the same person that did that is going to do a picture like that within an hour. Really big like that. And so, and you see, when we put that together, I said, you know, it has to be something with community. So community is what that is talking about. I see a recovery community center almost in every community, at least. You know, in New York, we say there's a liquor store in every corner. You know, in Texas, there's a church in every corner. You know, but we need to have community centers a lot more. And I can see that as part of the future. I can see that, you know, with this healthcare reform, I was in a meeting the other day with the homeless, and the homeless was the only ones that's not covered, they said, in the healthcare reform. That means that there's no, if I don't have no money, and so there's no federal level poverty level because I don't have no money. There's a minimum. And so the navigator said, you know what, you're right. You're not covered as a homeless person. So I think that one is that covering, you know, as far as recovering folks that are out there with nothing, but just like how we say that a world community free of addiction and mental health challenges, but also that we have those opportunities for people just walking off the streets, you know what I mean? So when in communities where all this traffic is, we got a lot of traffic here of addiction in this community. And so our goal is to have a supportive community for recovery, just to spread recovery to those recovery carriers in the community. So I see that in the future. I see us really being out there. I see that not only government, foundations, community, all of us coming together and making it happen, you know, within the next 10 years.
Great.
I think for me that the recovery community organizations and ARCO in particular is probably the future of this movement, in that the sense that we are the the network that is going to span the nation and support all of us to continue to grow and bring more and more individuals into recovery. And I also want to make a plea that one of the first things that Bill outlined was when we started in '98 is that we keep our face on recovery. And for me, I'm always reminded on the power, the simple power of our story, of one person reaching another, of telling our stories in places that they're not normally heard. We can get wrapped up very easily in service, and at CCAR we did until 2 years ago. We were going through a strategic plan. We had 8 points on about our centers, and now we're going to grow our business and do all this. And then we said, oops, wait a minute. Where's put a face on recovery? Where is the advocacy part? And that ended up as part of the strategic plan, and it's actually the one that we follow the most now. You know, we're trying to keep it half advocacy, putting a face on recovery, telling our stories, generating recovery carriers so that we have the services and people know about the services. Because what does the story do? It provides hope. Simply saying, if that person got well, so can I. And I mean, that's what John was talking about going into the prisons, just telling your story. You know, there's hope. And we're not only recovery is contagious, hope is contagious.
I was thinking, Bev, when you were talking about family, and I'm trying to remember where I saw it. I've been going through all the photos from all the celebration events in September, and I think it might have been Philly, but I'm not sure. Or it could have also been the Faces and Voices website. I'm looking through hundreds and hundreds of photos, and this one just like overwhelmed me. And it was a little girl with her mom, and she was holding a sign. Everybody remember what I'm talking about? My mom has been sober 1,000 some days. Little girl, you know, 4 or 5 years old. That's the kind of image that I think we're talking about. And Joe, when you were talking about right in the heart of the African American community, Joe picked me up at the airport and we were driving in, and Joe announces to me, this is our new location we're going to. We're now entering the heart of the African American community. And I looked up, and here's a big, huge alcohol billboard, and about 10 seconds later there was another huge alcohol billboard. So my goal is that when I come back next time, it'll be recovery is everywhere as we enter the African American community, okay?
So if you just want to raise your hand and then stand up and ask your question, we have 15 minutes to do that. We'll start right over here, Mark, and work our way around the room.
Bill, you did a really good job of bringing in the whole concept of families, and in doing so you talked about our history of moving from advocacy to recovery services to now this broader community of recovery. I've been focusing, because I'm a one-trick pony, on recovery services. And I'd be interested to have you comment about where you see recovery services going so that we don't implode them to over-professionalize them.
I'm going to give you this mic back.
You know, I think one of the things that we did at the very beginning, to be honest with you, is we didn't have a clue of what recovery communities needed beyond what was already being experienced and happening within recovery, within the rooms. Whether that was the rooms of 12-step programs or the rooms of faith-based programs or whatever. And so one of the things we did was we did these listening exercises, from everything from town meetings to, you know, interviewing people and focus groups and old-timers groups. Yeah. And it was really it was very humbling, because we simply were there not to sell. We were simply there to ask questions and listen. And what I'm thinking is we may be at a point as we begin to bridge this notion of we've used some family rhetoric, but have we really embraced family? You know, in terms of, it permeates everything we do. I think it'd be interesting to do the similar exercise, really focusing on families and needs of families, and bring them in and do those listening exercises. And then, that's the needs, and document that. And then we did this thing in some places called recovery resource mapping. Not treatment resource, but that's included. But it's much broader. Where are the meetings? Where are the recovery centers? Where do we have a recovery school? Everything, just mapped out geographically, particularly in a city the size of Dallas. And then we'd say, okay, if these are the needs of families, let's put on the map where the family recovery support resources are in the community and where are they located. And I think that would be an incredibly illuminating exercise. And then when we get that, the issue is, okay, now we got to go fix it. That's not it. The issue is, can we use those listening exercises to now get people interested and excited and talking with one another. And that's what I see happening with these grieving parents right now. All of a sudden, they're networking on the internet. Now they're getting together and they're organizing things like GRASP, Grief After Substance Passing support meetings. They're starting these little local recovery advocacy organizations. And I'm telling you, you talk about stories. You put a half a dozen of these people in front of a city council, everybody in the room's going to be crying within 30 minutes. This is powerful, powerful stuff. So I think we've gone to how do we organize a recovery community or engage individuals to how do we go from the needs of families to really begin to mobilize in whole family units to be part of organizing what they need to. It's sort of back to that thing of how do we create the physical, psychological, and social space inside communities, recovery space, that there's actually resources there. I'm not talking about the professional community. I'm really talking about a much larger kind of thing. And how much of that is family oriented, I think would be my thoughts. Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
Okay.
We defer.
Wilma?
We defer.
Yeah, go ahead, Beth.
I think that there are also some targeted populations for families. Like the population of families whose people are incarcerated.
Yes,
or
absolutely.
who are part of the drug court system. Providing some recovery support services or some support groups and education for them, as well as parenting skills. Could be, one way of looking at how do we begin to make some changes there or provide some services.
Yeah.
Let me just add one thing as far as that with communities of color, we know that families do different, as far as how do we recover, do we come together, some don't come together, and I think that for us to be creative, that's the cool thing about being a recovery community organization, that we can be as creative as we want to be, even with families, and bringing them together. And I think that that's one of the things I know that we're working on now, because there is some family, organization out there in the community, but they mainly on the mental health side.
Right.
But on the addiction.
Not on the
recovery
addiction side.
Right. We don't have a whole lot. So it's going to be an opportunity. It's going to be big, and that's what we want to do too.
Yeah.
Two things you brought up, Bill. One was around getting in our AAAM to do the research.
Speak up,
You brought up about getting in our AAA to do the research, and NIDA to do the research. One of the things that has fascinated me being in the federal system now, I don't see us doing advocacy with Congress people. You and Pat can go and talk to those administrators, but I've always found doing advocacy to make a change like that, it takes hitting all four sides. So folks in here needs to write to their Congress people. You have to meet with NIDA and you have to meet with Pam, but we have to do that on all sides. I don't see that happening at the federal level, and I don't understand that. I know we do it in state level, and I know folks in this room do it at the state level, but I don't see that, and I think that plays a part.
Agreed.
So,
But you
my
need a
other,
bill to meet Congress.
well,
You gotta have a bill to meet.
no, you don't. You can go and tell the congressperson to tell NIDA to give all y'all some money.
So they give it to who?
So they can give it to basis and forces or whoever you identified to be able to go and do some research. I just don't understand that. My other question is a bigger question though, because it's more personal. You brought up the issue around helping communities to recover. Critical. I come from a community that back in my years ago, a lot of the men drank. All of a sudden, in the late 60s, early 70s, heroin and cocaine became big. Lived in a rural community, and so what has happened, I've gone back to that community now, it has totally swallowed up this community. It swallowed up the whole community. No policemen come in.
Right.
Okay? Sure. And everybody in the community put on this facade that is not happening. Out of all of the men in that community that's my age, 75% of them are dead because of overdose. 75%. How do you help communities to heal? What's the recovery that you do for communities? Because this community needs it badly. The women are dying from HIV, and they're not talking to anybody about it.
I've done far more thinking about this than I probably should. And we have had like a laboratory in the city of Philadelphia where we've really been trying to explore this notion of what would be the strategies of community healing. And I'm not saying we're even close to where we want to be, but we just finished a paper called The Community as Patient. And if any of you drop me an email, or actually I'm trying to think if it's, I don't think it's posted yet. Just drop me an email, bwhite@chestnut.org, and ask for the Community as Patient article. I'll send you the PDF. It's the most detailed statement we got so far on community recovery and what would that look like and what would the processes be. And I've got tons more thinking through to get this. But what we are seeing is some tremendous excitement. Even at the neighborhood level, the idea of neighborhood recovery in areas devastated in parts of Philadelphia, where they're really coming together and almost thinking about, are there stages of recovery at a community level, and are they parallel to individual or family recovery? What's it take? Do we have the same kind of denial? Do we have the, And what we're finding is we have a lot of experience to draw on around our personal and family recovery to bring to bear on the whole understanding of what community healing could look like. So that reference I made this morning about people in recovery being catalyst of healing, I think that's kind of what's happening in some of those neighborhoods. If you ask, where's the positive in this horribly destroyed community? It's really some pockets of recovering people that are stepping forward and assuming the leadership for some, and bringing the whole community together to talk about we need a community recovery as a whole community. So, yes.
Bill, you brought up the word backlash, and as we've been forging forward, and personally in Utah, forging forward with the recovery community and really being tremendous advocates and bringing a voice to recovery, and even being participatory in this behavioral health integration, at the federal level and at the state level. But again, and I've been practically polling everybody. We just recently had an RFP for a peer specialist training that is integrated. Yet the concern I have is what you brought up, is how do we have our individuality with integration where we don't get lost. And they put one of the trainers to be a licensed mental health therapist,
Right.
not
Right.
supporting the movement of what we do with peers. And of course, I got left out of the conversation, of course. And trying not to lose my cool and not try to lose my position, and still be an advocate in what Bev said, standing up for what we believe we need to do in partnership and collaboration still. So that's a mouthful. Anything you could say would be helpful.
I raised the issue around representation earlier, around the adequacy of it, the authenticity of it, diversity of it. The disabilities movement, first coined this "nothing about us without us," and I really think that when we get excluded from those tables, it's time we really begin to mobilize and come with that singular message. You cannot make decisions that affect our lives and the lives of the constituents we represent when we're not at the table expressing our voice and needs and experience and hope at that table. And so, I think that some of the early work that we did was, Joe talked about relationship building, and I think we all did that. Bob Savage and Phil were brilliant in terms of what they did in Connecticut with their relationships with Tom Kirk and the state. So, we used some of our charm, some of our charisma, to be honest, probably some of our manipulative skills on top of that, to build those. But we did it out of a kind of nice guy perspective. And we may be at a point with things moving so fast. I still think we use those because I think those have been very effective. But I think there may be times where we do go to a little more confrontational strategy, so that when people exclude us, they pay a price for that. And that can include political price. It could, if nothing else, there are some of those public forums they're going to be holding. I promise you, we can embarrass them in public. Okay, we know some people in our community that can do that very, very well, right? So just, that's the only thing I was thinking off the top of my head.
Is that good, John? Are there others? And then we'll do John first and then Michael.
You know, I'm not sure this is the right forum for this, but we are living in such exciting times with this whole movement that is shifting and addressing this problem that we understand can make a real difference, but this problem is not exclusive to the United States. And so I'm just wondering about and this may be more for faces than, however, to respond to, so many countries are just devastated by addiction. So the opportunity to spread this good thing that we know is really going to make a difference, and what about those efforts to expand it beyond the borders? I know it's happening to a limited degree so far.
Yeah, I can give you some indication of that. The recovery advocacy section of my website averages 10 countries a day hits on those on the papers we've generated out of this movement to date. The very first time I was trying to think, some of the work in the UK, when we first started talking about the idea of people marching en masse in recovery, I swear to God, they looked at me like I was psychotic. I mean, they really thought I needed some medication to even suggest such a thing. And then I went to Tokyo, and then it was even more extreme. If you think of the stigma in the Japanese culture towards alcoholism or addiction. So, I mean, they were just, it was sort of like deer in the headlights when I was describing some of the activities over here. I just got the series of photos. There were 4 Japanese recovery parades in the last 3 months in Hiroshima, Tokyo, and 2 other cities. And you should see the signs and the smiles on those faces walking in downtown Tokyo. And that's all a way of saying what you've begun here in terms of this movement is clearly infectious as it's moving to other countries. And I think, to Pat's credit, Faces and Voices really extended itself. I mean, when resources were limited here, and we didn't have a lot of time and resources to take care of our own business, we never turned a request down from any that I'm aware of from any other country. And I know Pat's been to the UK, and Phil's been to the UK. We constantly feed materials, papers. You need to talk to so-and-so because their community sounds a lot like Liverpool, and, that kind of thing. So, and that's been exciting. And by the way, through that process, we've tried to do it not like, okay, we got it together over here and we're going to teach you, what we need to do. We're learning some interesting tricks from some of the things they're doing in the UK. They've got a recovery cafe network that would shame us in terms of what they've done, but they really want to know about our recovery schools. And they desperately want to know what we're doing with recovery support for medication-assisted treatment. So I think there's enormous potential with this international dialogue. Phil, you share for your UK experience.
Well, I had the opportunity to go to the United Kingdom and speak in 7 cities in 4 days, and what was really interesting and telling for me is that in the United States it's 95% believe in a power greater than ourselves. In the United Kingdom it's 25%. And so it was really fascinating because I get up there and talk about my recovery, and it was kind of deer in the headlights. But I still have probably 300, 400 Facebook friends from the United Kingdom. So they're always in touch with me to figure it out. So social media is right across the, travels very easily. And the other thing that we learned, it's called the tall poppy syndrome. So they have one district that's doing really well with recovery services, and the other ones are not doing so well. So the Parliament's response to that is to not fund the one that's doing well and defund the whole program. So the tall poppy is, instead of trying to grow the other poppies the same as the tall poppy, you just cut the tall poppy down. And so it's like a whole different mindset and culture, but it's also about 50 years behind us, and I think what we're able to infuse with this recovery spirit is really accelerating their process.
Yeah,
and they've had some amazing walks, and they had it in Birmingham this year, and it was just thousands of people were there, so it's exciting.
Let me just
Go ahead, Joe.
very quick, because I haven't been across the street, but across the street. Across the street, let me tell you what across the street.
It's a good street.
Yeah. Well, I did a presentation with Dr. Neese, who's a psychiatrist that goes to Russia every year. And United Methodist Church here in Howard Park sends him to Russia to treat the alcoholics every year. And so me and him, we did our presentation. After he saw my presentation, he said, you know what? He said, Neil, I want to introduce you to these guys from Russia. He said, because I go over there every year as a psychiatrist, but they don't need me. They need a community model. You just showed me a community model.
Yep.
You know, just little old me is not enough. So I think that, you know, what we have as a community centers and also recovery organizations also can be put almost anywhere. Another thing is Andre Johnson, who's not here over the left, but he goes to Africa every year too and provides recovery.
We got time?
We have one last question.
Okay.
You mentioned economic development. In this community here, it's an economic embargo where banks don't loan money to business to create jobs and opportunity. There's no development. It's the city is trying to do gentrification because of that State Fair, Texas, generating in 1 month $350 million. And they're trying to get possession of this community, and they allow drugs to be sold all over this community. And when you look at, we have a car wash that's been there for 25 years, and the police allow them to sell dope every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So economically, this city wants what's happening in this community as far as being drug infested. This is part of the conspiracy. And it's part of the gentrification process. So just kind of, give me your idea, because economic development is what we need to create the opportunities for people to have jobs and they don't have to rely on drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, and I think in the current circumstances, it may be very difficult to get governments to do the kind of investment that I'm talking about. But I'm really interested in this idea of micro-industries. And it's sort of like, you've probably seen like a 60-minute show where people in America can give loans to a woman in India to invest in a sewing machine, right? And she pays 2% interest or whatever it is, and well, my thought is if we got a recovery community and people in that recovery community that have begun to get their lives together and begin to have financial assets, why not have some people in the community that have resources begin to invest in some of the micro businesses to support, to not only start businesses by people in recovery, but those businesses hiring people in recovery. And really at a small level. I mean, if you really, I'll be really honest with you, my model for this is what the Nation of Islam did in the city of Chicago in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. In terms of, if you want to talk about the beginnings of black nationalism and small black businesses in their communities, in communities where there were virtually no black businesses until the Nation of Islam come in. So my position is if we got a whole bunch of people coming out of prisons into the community and nobody will hire them, maybe we should build some business and we should hire them. And even if that starts at a very small level. Cassandra, where are you at? Atlanta, you're in the house, right? My vision for that was when you did recovery at work, the early projects you did down there of hiring people, and I think when last time I was down there, you were painting up one end of Atlanta to the other, and it was that's an example, I think, of the kind of micro business development that I'm thinking about.
Great. Well, thank you so much to our panel.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.